So I wanted to cover where are our customers moving into 2022, and one of the key drivers, whether we like it or not, and there's mixed views amongst the industry, is where are our workers and the team working from now. A very recent McKinsey survey of 3,600 B2B key decision makers and senior decision makers found that 91% of them expect the remote and digital models that companies had to embrace over the last 18 months to 2 years is not going away and will definitely be here for the long run. And flexible working, a hybrid of working from home and the office or other places is the new norm and is definitely not set to change. That's created very mixed feelings between employers and employees, and quite a degree of misalignment. So in the study that was done, employers said they'd be happy for their team to work 1 day a week from home, whereas employees want to work at least half the week from home. 85% of women want flexibility versus 75% of men, but a clear preference with women wanting to work from home. The relevance of this and highlighting the differences between the preferences of men and women is that there is a real danger of the office becoming the man cave, and it's certainly being seen in many office environments where flexibility has to still be adopted, and certainly it will be a key point of difference for employers when they're looking to recruit. And we all probably know at this moment in time the recruitment market is quite a challenging place in terms of recruiting good people for positions in organizations, and as people recruit new team members, flexibility is becoming a key criteria of employment. So the risk of the kind of 50 scenarios where offices were dominated by men is certainly, we're seeing a shift towards that. What that means as a marketeer and from a marketeer's perspective is where are our customers and how do we engage with our customers, and do we have to change? Are things changing? And the reality of this is very much yes, in terms of how we reach customers, and particularly, and I've focused on B2B because there is a difference. Whereas normally I'd say I don't want to kind of muddy the water with B2B and B2C. Actually, there's a big difference from a B2B perspective. And one of those key differences is the challenges faced by sales and marketing teams from a B2B perspective. One of the big areas of concerns that companies are facing at the moment, and they do see it as a concern, and I see it more of a challenge that we have to embrace and adopt new methods of working to kind of tackle this issue, is the cancellation of in-person events. So still at this point in time, there is approximately a 73% cancellation rate of in-person events. Sales teams are seeing fewer sales opportunities being generated. So 46% of sales teams are seeing fewer sales opportunities being generated. 21% see fewer leads being generated from marketing. 18% are seeing loss of existing customers. 14% are seeing marketing leads not converting as well. We're also seeing reduced headcounts and hiring plans, but that is in certain areas. And it's not something I'm going to delve into here, but there is definitely shifts in infrastructure and organizational sort of composition of people, which is seeing in some instances a huge demand for certain jobs, and in other instances the restructuring and the removing of headcounts within business. So there are some key challenges that are being faced by sales and marketing teams. But when I look at these challenges, I think these challenges are very much as a result of the change in behavior and the change of the environment, as opposed to anything from a catastrophic economic event. And it's really how we face these changes head on and we deal with these as a business. The reliance of in-person events or meetings has posed a significant issue. And as I said, 73% of respondents saying that people are cancelling in-person events. And that's seen as a key challenge. The 46% of fewer sales opportunities. But that being said, the use of virtual events and virtual meetings and digital meetings is still very much here to stay and on the card, and increasingly paying dividends in how organizations are reaching customers. So as marketeers, what we have to do is think about how we can support this model and how we can address the issues of potentially less leads being generated, or less sales being converted, or fewer face-to-face meetings. It doesn't mean that there are less buyers out there or there are less sales opportunities. I go back to, it comes down to how we're servicing customers and how we're identifying those needs of customers. So on top of this, 47% of respondents in this survey reported that they were reallocating budget from physical to digital activities, and that's no surprise. Certainly, what COVID has influenced is a huge shift in physical to digital, and looking at how customers can be serviced in the business environment digitally through a shift of buyer behaviour, and also a shift of where customers are at. One of the key takeaways is that buyers are consuming far more content, and the demand for B2B content has risen by nearly 50% year on year. Now, what this may be as a result of is an increase in the number of touch points that now happen in the research stage, as opposed to a rise in total purchases. Now, what that means is that people are looking for more information. And that's no surprise, as people during lockdown were at home. They were researching and looking more on the web. And I think those behaviours have continued through outside of lockdown. And I don't think they're going to go. So again, it's looking at when customers are in different phases of the sales cycle. So we know there are different phases in the sales cycle. There's a research phase, there's a consideration phase, ready to buy, and then after sales. What are the touch points? What do we need to be looking at to influence and convince buyers at different stages in their journey that was different for perhaps a couple of years ago? And the key takeaway from this that I would say is, do you guys as businesses still understand your customer journeys, and are they relevant? Because I think the customer journey has radically changed. And again, where you have people working remotely, working in offices, that means that their behaviours are different depending on the environment they're in. So actually looking at the different touch points and factoring that in your content plans and how that is factored in the decision-making process is really critical. Webinar consumption has risen by nearly 300%. And again, that's no surprise because of lockdown. But the key takeaway from this is that's not going away either. Marketeers have an even larger opportunity to support sales now, and with a shift to virtual selling, 7 out of in a different study by the RAIN Group, 7 in 10, so nearly 71% of salespeople reported that they're now doing half of their sales virtually. And the near sort of complete shift to digital interactions means that organizations must align sales and marketing. Sales and marketing alignment is something that I regularly talk about with clients, because often there can be a significant disconnect between sales and marketing. What do sales expect, and what is their role, and what are the expectations of marketing, and what is their role? And I'll touch on this shortly, but with the shift in buyer behavior, with a shift in where people are located, often I would see a sales function where the sales director or the MD would be saying, sales guys, you need to be on the ground, you need to be out there, you need to be visible with customers. That rule just cannot apply anymore. And where marketing may have been expected, or some marketing teams may have been expected to drive face-to-face appointments, again, that isn't so true anymore, because there are different ways that sales teams can see customers, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person, or whether it's more event based. So the alignment between sales and marketing and the expectations is greater than ever. Because if there is no alignment and sales are expecting one thing, and the sales director is expecting marketing to drive face-to-face appointments, but actually customers don't want that, and marketing's desperately trying to get face-to-face appointments, and those leads aren't converted and then being blamed for the lack of conversion, you can see where figures start to come into play with lack of conversion, lack of face-to-face appointments, cancellation of face-to-face appointments, because there is a group and a very large group of people out there that are behaving in a very different way. And as businesses, we have to understand where our customers are and what they want and expect. So from a marketing perspective, I think marketing has to keep it really simple, and a structured framework to support existing and new customer acquisition is absolutely critical. Marketing must be really razor sharp in their activities and not scattergun, because we have different customer groups in different areas now behaving and expecting different things. One of the key messages that I want to kind of focus on as part of today's presentation is a focus on the customer experience, because that's critical, and I'll come back to that. Managing the expectations and ownership between the sales and marketing function is critical. So I think often there does need to be a reminder of what is the function of marketing, which often falls into brand awareness and lead generation. Sales is conversion, after sales is account management, and then underpinning all of this is clear KPIs. But KPIs, less is more. So KPIs are not useful if there's 10 or 15 of them. So smaller, less KPIs, clear KPIs, and a clear delineation between what marketing needs to do, what sales needs to do, and then how customers are supported after the sale. As digital organizations, or not necessarily digital, as any business has scaled with their digital first, and most businesses, there's very few businesses I know today that haven't scaled from a digital first perspective. There are some things that they have had to change or approach differently from a sales and marketing perspective because of this, as their digital environment has scaled. One of them is a change in communication style and messaging. And this goes back to understanding what customers want and what their needs are, and then making sure that communication style and messaging is effective. Again, I'm going to touch on this a little bit further, and the importance of effective communication, and not just the by email or by automated bots, and the messaging style that's approached as there is more content consumption. So being more creative in our messaging to be able to hit those different touch points that customers are in, depending on where they're in the buying journey. Implementing or changing technology, which has obviously been a key one. Relocating budget from physical to digital. Changing roles and responsibilities. We've seen big shifts here as organizations change roles and responsibilities to drive a digital first approach. Offering charitable support and supporting that CSR plan that most organizations tend to have, and adjusting KPIs and targets because of the digital first approach. Again, KPIs might be on virtual meeting versus physical, and a different blend between the two. I want to just touch a little bit more on customer experience, because I think customer experience is the game changer, and it's where, in my view, the battle is won or lost. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples just from my own perspective, and then I'm going to take that back in terms of what this means for organizations, because the examples that I'm going to give are from me as a consumer. However, they still come down to an experience, and are still very relevant from a B2B environment. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is coffee. I absolutely love coffee. And on a day-to-day basis, having coffee is important to me. And I will buy a coffee from somewhere every single day. The thing that drives the coffee purchase is it's got to be good coffee. So that's the first criteria I have. That's what I want. And then the second, there's a number of other things. One is convenience. One is it hard to hate cold coffee. Second is speed. And based on that, the options of where I buy my coffee from are narrowed down. Now, I happen to buy my coffee from McDonald's because McDonald's provide a really good customer experience for what I want at that moment in time. So at that moment in time, I want something fast, I want something instant, and it's great value. So not only is it meeting the things that I want and expect, it's £1.60 versus the Starbucks, which is near on £3.50. And while Starbucks might provide a good brand experience, they're slow, and the experience that I get from McDonald's, for me at that point of time, is much better, and therefore I make that choice. However, if I want to go, there are other places I can get coffee from, and if I was in London and I wanted to go to the Dorchester for a coffee, where I might pay £7 or £10, the experience and the expectations I have of that are very different. I'm looking for something where I'm sat in a nice environment, where I've got somebody who's going to talk to me and be nice to me. I don't want to be rushed. And therefore, the experience that I get from that brand and that entity is very, very different. But it meets what I want at that moment in time. The other example I'm going to give is banks. This doesn't just relate to banks. It relates to other large institutions like British Gas and Sky. But I'm taking banks because banks have always been seen to be at the forefront of customer service in terms of digital adoption, technology, and the leaders in self-service. And they have driven their whole tech and digital approach from a customer service and a customer experience perspective. But this is what I think banks have done. So I ring up my bank and I'm in this choices system where I either have to speak about what I want, and it doesn't hear me, and I have to repeat myself 4 times. Sorry, I didn't quite hear that. Or it repeats, are you looking for this? And it's not what I'm looking for. Or I get a choice of 6 things that I have to choose from. By the time I've got to option 6, can't remember what the first 3 options were. Or I've pressed the wrong button. So by the time I get to an advisor, I'm generally highly frustrated because I've probably sat in a queue, I have pressed the wrong buttons, I wasn't heard correctly. And then when the customer service advisor speaks to me, he or she will generally say, "Good morning, Mrs. Whitingham." And then will continue to proceed to call me madam. 2 things which I detest. Firstly, you've got my name wrong. Secondly, you're then calling me madam, and I hate being called madam. And so you're winding me up even further. So what started out as somebody mapping a great customer experience because I'm going to automate the experience so customers get to where they want to get to faster and quicker, actually ends up, and I think probably everyone can agree they've had similar experiences, as quite a long, protracted, unpleasant experience. And then when I get to the end of it, they can't even get my name right. And they don't even know me because they're calling me madam. And those two examples are really strong examples of where businesses need to look at what experience they are providing via their customer journey. The first thing is communication, and asking in what way do customers want to be communicated to. Would I prefer someone picking up the phone at the bank as soon as I ring them, and I might be in a queue, and saying, "Good morning, Nicole. What can I do for you today?" Technology will facilitate that because there's caller number recognition. So most banks will be able to, the system will be able to recognize your phone number. If they'd asked me my preference of what I want to be called at some point in the marketing journey, how do I want to be addressed? I would say I want to be just called Nicole. So they would know that. So instead of spending millions on billboards around bus stations, or millions on infrastructure to make a journey better, actually go back to basics, because the cost to actually have somebody address you with your name, and the technology for that isn't so different as the horrendous experience that I'm put through each and every time. So the point is, when you're looking at your customers, how do they want to be communicated with? And how personalized is the journey? Because that journey can be made very personalized, whether it's in a digital or physical environment. And to me, this is where we have to be really careful from a technical and operational efficiency. We know that self-service and all these complex phone systems have been driven by the desire for speed and improving customer service and connecting with the right people. But actually, some of those experiences can provide a terrible brand experience. I go back to the McDonald's experience, which is driven by technology. I know that the technology that is implemented within McDonald's, and it's mind-blowing, of how they map that journey from the minute you hit the screen to when you pick your order up at the end of the second counter, and the time that's involved. All of that is measured to deliver a consistent experience each and every time, and they do that really well. Now, there are other outlets that are looking to improve that by collecting the right sort of data. And it goes back to knowing your customers and what they want. The McDonald's customer knows their customers and what they want and how to provide the right experience, as does the Dorchester when their customers come in for a cup of coffee. And when you're looking at what experience you provide for your customers, it's got to be from how personalized is it, how effective is it in terms of satisfying the wants and needs of that customer at a particular point in time. And it can't be underestimated. I believe that customer experience is one of the key areas that will differentiate an organization, and a great experience will drive repeat business. It will drive word of mouth and referrals. It will reduce the cost of acquisition because of the above two items I've mentioned. It will increase the lifetime customer value. McDonald's has me for life. I'm not a McDonald's customer from a food perspective. From a coffee perspective, I 100% am. And that lifetime customer value, which is a key metric that businesses should be looking at moving into 2022, is absolutely critical. And then from a brand recall perspective, it's really important, because these are the things that make your customers remember you and the experience they've had with you. So what I would say is that marketeers in conservative industries that are resistant to change need to push through, and need to be bold and look at, just because we've always done something in a particular way, challenge that. Are there other ways? How can we personalize? Are our customers happy with the way they're being serviced? And reach beyond your comfort zones based on what your customers are telling you. Now, that's an important point. It goes back to something which I harp on all the time. Do you know what your customers want? Have you asked them recently? I would always reiterate, you cannot underestimate the value of speaking to customers, and particularly in these times where behaviors have changed, asking them what they want, asking them how they want to be communicated to, and how they want to meet, and then servicing them and marketing to them based on that. Key accounts is something I often think that can be neglected by businesses, because key accounts should be nurtured, and relationships should really be developed and loved on a regular basis. That doesn't mean that just because it might be a digital interaction that it can't be meaningful. And again, it's with key accounts. If there are processes where they are automated, perhaps looking at the language, and this goes back to the survey where marketeers said they were changing how they communicated in the language, and the language being used. Automation of how are you today? How can we help? I still think that you can't beat talking, and effective communication, I think, comes very much from verbal communication, and I do think that is something that should be factored within the sales and marketing process. Building infrastructure around customer touch point, so that there are lots of touch points, whether it be phone, whether it be email, whether it be interception of forms, and I'll come on to that in a second. But looking at how workflow processes can be built or rebuilt so that we are proactive as opposed to reactive. And again, you might say, well, what does that mean? How do we rebuild a workflow process so it's proactive versus reactive? But if we know a customer wants something, which might be an indicative quote, it might be a face-to-face consultation online, provide that from the outset, change the workflow process so they can do that without having the need for unnecessary steps. I think reconsidering how marketing leads are scored is really important, because digital interactions are more important than ever, and certainly with a change in how and where people are working from, we know that digital is a key part of day to day. So when in that customer journey, and when customers are finding you or they have found you, how are those leads now scored? Because what might have been classed as a cold customer, just because they've downloaded a PDF, which is a soft call to action. So when we're measuring our CTAs on, say, for example, on a website, we might have a PDF download as a soft CTA. Actually, could that be a warm lead? So instead of scoring that lead as cold, could that be scored as warm, because they may be further down the research line than we actually realize? And I think it's taking the interceptions and the details that customers give us at different points of their journey, whether it be a form fill, whether it be a download, whether it be a login to a resource area. Should those leads be classed as warmer lead, and the sales interception a lot earlier than it might have been 2 years ago? Because that will then change the perspective of fewer leads coming through to the salespeople. Fewer leads are coming through because the way we're operating is different. Therefore, scoring the leads differently and intercepting with sales probably earlier in the buying journey is probably more important now than ever. And then this goes back to KPIs, where KPIs, a KPI of a brochure download or a form fill may have not been cast as a serious KPI. I think it's looking at KPIs and understanding where people are in their journey, how they're consuming content, what they need in that discovery phase, and when they're ready to talk to a salesperson, and potentially readjusting those KPIs that the business is setting. I haven't lost anyone, have I?
No, still here.
No. So I want to touch on content marketing, because content marketing is critical in the sales process. And it's the area that sales need marketing to drive. So it's a critical area from both a sales and a marketing perspective. Again, from a recent Cisco report, 82% of all online traffic is looking for content to consume. 84% of users say they are more likely to invest in a product or service after watching a video. The team at WilsonCooke will tell you, and that I am always talking about video, and with clients, video. It doesn't matter if it's on your phone, you've got to get video out there. And this report very much supports that. The great thing about B2B sales videos is that they're customizable on different platforms, and they can be personalized and tweaked for different customer types at different points in the journey, and really cost effectively. They can be used really effectively to highlight products, highlight services, and promote case studies. And case studies can be promoted in an innovative way, again, that will help drive that lead generation requirement that sales need, and that marketing is expected to do. A common mistake that B2B organizations make is when they're creating content themselves is not putting the customer at the forefront of the content that's being created. So again, it's touch points, it's understanding what are customers looking for, what would they like to see, and building content around that. Content focused digital marketing from a this year perspective and moving forward is critical. And it's critical that the wants and needs of customers are satisfied in that content. So when you're thinking of putting content together, there's always an element of a point of need. I've got to talk about my products and services, but actually look at the challenges your customers are facing. What is their challenge? What's their pain point? What are they struggling with? And then when content is put together or videos are put together, it addresses those challenges. So again, it's about being connected with your customers and creating meaningful content for them. So content, again, can drive a great customer experience. It's important to give weighting to different content at different touch points. So, if I'm in the research phase, how much content do I need? Is it a downloadable PDF? Is it a short snippet video? Is it a combination of a customer testimonial plus a little bit of video plus a download? It's understanding that and then weighting content differently at different touch points, whether it's research or whether it's to drive that conversion through. Integration with CRM, I think, is critical, because as leads might be fewer, or actually leads may be less or maybe more, because we are trying to capture customers and moving those cold leads into a warm lead status earlier on in the buying journey, that will actually increase our leads and give us more opportunity. So looking at the integration of digital platforms into the likes of Salesforce or other known CRM systems, where you're not having to manually enter data, but actually you can capture customers, earlier in their journey at the softer goals, and have the sales team intercept a far earlier point in the buying journey than they probably ordinarily would. And I say at an earlier point, it may not be earlier. It may be the change in how content's being consumed, how research is being done, how decisions are being made. So it's almost putting aside what we know and not making assumptions, and taking a fresh look at how we engage with customers, and at what point. So as a key actions, and kind of drawing this all together, and what would I do? I think an audit is critical, a stop, and where are we at, and almost a reset. Asking yourselves, do we understand our customers now? Do we understand what they want and where we are positioned in the marketplace? And based on what your customers want, where you are positioned, do you understand what they need, what they want, and where they're at in different parts of their journey? Reassess those customer journeys, reassess the decision-making process and touch points, based on where that customer might be, at home, in the office, somewhere remote, and look at how that's accommodated from a marketing perspective. Nurture strategic accounts. Really, really important to nurture and develop strategic accounts. How can service be improved? How can personalization and connecting with customers be improved? Thinking innovatively outside the box, new ways of being able to reach people, new processes, new solutions, because it doesn't have to go back to business as usual, and it isn't business as usual. There are ways to adapt to the new norm, and just a couple of examples of thinking differently is providing customers with instant quotes online. Now, initially, you might look at that and think, well, no, we can't do that, because firstly, if I provide an instant quote, I devalue my service offering, because I make it all about price. If I provide an instant quote and my customer goes and finds another quote, it might be cheaper, and I'll lose that sale. But actually, instant quote doesn't mean that. It's how that's implemented. If I click on an instant quote button, I might capture a little bit of information, but actually intercept that customer immediately with if I've captured their phone number, or I'm able to bring up a pop-up on video. Hi, I'm here. I can provide an instant. So there are ways of thinking differently about instant quotes, so that the interception is almost immediate, because that customer's in the buying cycle. They're ready they're looking at options. So whilst you may not want to provide an instant quote, you can almost portray that that's what they're going to get, and it's where you intercept and grab that customer, and then talk about the value. The same with form fills. If somebody's filling in a form, they want to engage with you. So rather than letting them fill in that form, it come to you, and then at some point in the day or the day after, somebody get back in touch. How can that instill immediacy? Is it an alert on one of the sales team's phones? Is it an intercept again, where a pop-up, we're here to talk now, click the button, or actually it's more aggressive than that and the video pops up? Now, that might be too invasive, but the point is think differently. If your customer goes to download something, can you grab them? Can you intercept earlier and make the most of that, rather than the delay from downloading to reading to maybe never getting in contact? And that's the way you improve, you nurture, and you increase that likelihood of conversion. But don't think in the way of the norm. Don't think we can't give an instant quote, because that gives away details. Give the perception. Decide how you intercept. Where can you be immediate? Where can you be different from the competition? And digital transformation will become generationless. It's an expectation from everyone, from a business perspective and a customer perspective. It's about how digitally savvy you can become, based on providing a great experience, whether it be via a mobile device, whether it be self-service. But what I would say is make every interaction memorable and personalized. Don't be the bank with the buttons. You know, I end up aggressively pressing the star button 15 times because I know that it will say, sorry, I don't understand what you've done, and you obviously struggling, and then it speeds me getting through to an advisor who then gets my name wrong. So it's making it memorable. Data also shows, and I think this is a big one to take away, that customers want to be talked to by a human. I think one of the dangers of digital transformation is it becomes all too easy to fill in a form. It becomes all too easy to send an email, and we forget the face-to-face and the verbal communication that I think is critical. Direct calls are up by 40% pre-pandemic. I think because people were lonely and perhaps didn't speak or engage to the level that they wanted to. And we should maximize on that. And whilst we can bring in things like chatbots to improve efficiency and costs, you cannot replace the real customer experience, the human-to-human conversation. So my guidance as a marketeer would be to encourage that. And whilst it might take longer, there's a balance between how much is digital and how much the human interaction then comes into play. And that's where I go back to saying, if somebody does a form fill, can we intercept that journey immediately? If they do a brochure download, how can we bring in a human being sooner in the process? Because you cannot replace real conversations. Emails, whilst I like the speed and efficiency of emails, you lose human engagement. And I think the loss of that is huge in terms of the impact of brand experience, customer experience. And I would always go back to saying, if we can bring a human in to talk instead of an email or instead of something digital, will that improve our brand awareness and will that improve our conversion? And I would say yes. As we head into 2022, the big message here is improve customer experiences. There's some really clever virtual meeting platforms now, virtual event platforms. Explore them. Don't be afraid of them. Can they integrate into your digital platforms so that a meeting can happen on the website virtually instantly? And this is where I go back to changing the thought process and where and how you intercept customers. Customers for life is really important, and it's something that I'm seeing be completely elevated in as we move into 2022. You know, there's been so much investment in digital investment, and you look at the banks and the big players and the very clever phone systems, but actually, what are they adding in terms of lifetime customer value? I stick with my bank because it's easy, but actually, if I could change it, I would, because it's not a good experience. And again, as organizations, there will be some of you out there that are providing experiences that just aren't the best. And there is always a competitor that's out there trying to take what you've got. So look at how you're servicing, look at how you're delivering, look at that customer experience, because that ultimately translates to a brand experience, and see how you can improve that. And that is the end of me for today.